Morning, and thank you all for joining us. I appreciate it. I want to start by thanking my council colleagues for their unanimous support of the series of plans that we're introducing today. Normally, I would talk first at one of my press conferences, but I want to show my appreciation for my city council colleagues and have them speak first today. So I'll begin with my co-sponsor, Commissioner Dan Ryan, followed by Commissioner Rubio, then Commissioner Hardesty, and finally Commissioner Mapps. Welcome, Commissioner Ryan. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you, Mayor, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here. I want to say first and foremost, we need to return our parks and our sidewalks back to our city. I'm glad that Commissioner Rubio, our Parks Commissioner, and Commissioner Hardesty, our Transportation Commissioner, have joined the entire City Council to double down on the city's commitment to do just that. Our children and our families want a place to play in our parks. Our elders want to go on a safe stroll in their neighborhood. And people relying on mobility aids require accessible walkways. I've always said we need to meet our homeless population where they are. I have lived experience, which gives me pragmatic clarity and a heartfelt compassion on this issue. This was and remains my motivation to serve my hometown. As you know, I believe in on-ramps to safe, stable housing. That's why we created the Safe Rest Villages, which offer a specific type of shelter along this continuum of housing. And just so you know, we have opened 3, one opens next Friday, and the other 4 are well on their way. Today, the mayor has outlined a different, larger scale plan to provide additional basic human services not currently available in the 700 unsanctioned camps scattered around our streets. This plan will provide an entry point of services for those moving from chronic homelessness to sustained housing. With designated, managed, and secure encampments, we have an opportunity to establish the process of trust with the homeless participants and with the community at large. It will allow us to coordinate support systems with nonprofits and organizations, including those specializing in behavioral and mental health. Above all, this plan will build a stronger bridge between the city and our homeless population, allowing us to get to know people by name and directing access to necessary supports that can eventually transition our homeless population from streets to housing. And in regard to housing production, we can all agree the pace in which we are building housing is not fast enough, nor is it scaled to address the humanitarian crisis we are facing. And this has been true for decades. Government cannot solve this alone. Working together with the private sector and with the nonprofit sector, we can align our action and address this emergency with laser focus. The devil is in the details in executing this plan. The goal to establish a foundation to deliver 20,000 additional units into the housing pipeline, the city needs to do everything we can to remove the roadblocks to building more housing. The work of the Permit Improvement Task Force, which Commissioner Mapps and I lead, will be the cornerstone to implement this housing development plan. Affordable housing must be a priority, and we must expand our permitting capacity. Affordable housing should be at the front of the line, but without a plan to move the line, we're all stuck with the status quo. We will stay focused on the permitting system and streamline coordination between all 7 bureaus involved with permitting. The Bureau of Development Services is the mothership, but permitting also includes the Park Bureau, the Water Bureau, the Environmental Services Bureau, the Transportation Bureau, the Fire Bureau, the Housing Bureau, and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Today, the mayor is outlining a different large-scale plan to provide additional basic human services not currently available. Oops. Working together. Lastly, I want to protect the city, protect the heart of the city, and think big on how we reimagine what downtown looks like. We currently have the equivalent of 7 US Bank towers of vacant office space. And this plan will allow us to envision a downtown that includes additional housing, broader access point to the arts, and create avenues for young entrepreneurs to build their businesses. These resolutions require strong partnerships with Multnomah County and with Metro. Together, we must align our vision and action. I'm committed to action, and I'm thrilled to stand here as one in a united front. Simply put, we can no longer tolerate the intolerable. It's time to build, it's time to innovate, and it's time to take some risks to get our city out of this ditch. And now I'm very happy to introduce Commissioner Carmen Rubio.
Thank you. It's good to be in this space with my colleagues today. The housing crisis we are in is growing, and as a city, we aren't alone. This is uncharted territory for the city and others across the country, and this is why my colleagues and I are all here. We're all united in our love of the city and aligned as a council about our need for action. I want to acknowledge all the work that went into these resolutions by council staff, bureau directors, and bureau policy staff. And I appreciate the time that they invested with my staff to include our feedback around this developing work in recent days. These folks are undertaking a data-informed approach to the work, and so far the data has been clear that we have deep housing disparities in our community that continue to grow, and local governments, community organizations, and advocates are all working hard to meet this growing need. It is also true that all that we are doing right now is not enough. We all know that disinvestment in basic housing needs for our vulnerable and frontline communities has been occurring over decades. And the reality is that we are not yet equipped with enough housing stock to meet the immediate need. And this is why we need to act with our fullest ability to provide services, stability, and safety with dignity and care to every person in need of a safe place to call home. We need much more housing that is currently in the pipeline. And we also need interim, safe, healthy solutions for our houseless community members while they are awaiting the supportive housing services they need. Just as we also want safety and care in our own families, our houseless neighbors also deserve to feel safe and sleep without fear of violence, and also for their humanity to be recognized and respected. But let me be clear, how we carry out any new approach with our houseless community will be critically important and make all the difference in its effectiveness. And I plan to be vocal and active participant and a partner in shaping those approaches to ensure that they are reflective of and accountable to the values of respect, equity, dignity, service, and compassion. These resolutions only set the stage for the real work and hard conversations ahead. And I want to be clear that as a member of this council, I will do everything I can to ensure that we are communicating and working transparently with our jurisdictional and regional partners on this effort. As the commissioner that oversees the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, know that I will lean in hard on our job to create more housing development opportunities. That work is already underway and is the critical first step to identify the land that can be banked for development. We then hand those opportunities off to the Portland Housing Bureau and to Prosper to make it happen. No one has all the answers or a crystal ball, but we would all be derelict if we were not doing all that we can in this critical moment. This is how we will be working together, with urgency, with transparency, and with hope. Thank you.
Great, and we'd like to invite Commissioner Hardesty up next.
Thank you. I am here today with my council colleagues because we all agree that the suffering on our streets is unacceptable. I am here because I am a renter in East Portland, and every day when I leave my apartment, I see large encampments. I see poverty. I see the suffering on our streets. And every day, my heart is broken at our failure as a society to care for our most vulnerable and provide an adequate safety net. I am not here to endorse or oppose this plan at this moment, but to express appreciation that there are multiple proposals on the table that have intriguing elements to them. The devil is always in the details. And here's what I know. We all agree we are in an emergency and should respond with more urgency. That should start with immediately expanding our emergency temporary shelter capacity to meet current needs, protecting renters so our crisis doesn't get exacerbated, and rapidly expanding housing that people can actually afford to live in. The expansion of temporary shelter must be tied to real long-term solutions, which is housing. I support temporary sanctioned camping areas and increasing our indoor shelter capacity. I am proud of my collaboration with Mayor Wheeler at the onset of the pandemic that created 3 sanctioned camping areas that provided culturally specific environments. I support diverting people away from the criminal justice system and providing more treatment and support for those experiencing mental or behavioral health challenges. I have long advocated for establishing a public land trust, a land bank, and I'm encouraged to see this proposal considers that option. There is a lot to think about here, and I was only recently provided a written copy of these proposals. I anticipate council offices will be offering amendments, and that's why I'm not taking a concrete position today. I'm looking forward to hearing from the public over the next few weeks to get Portlanders' thoughts on how to move forward. I am hopeful as a council, we can work together to craft an urgent response to our houseless crisis that is grounded in compassion and lending a helping hand to those most in need. My office will be releasing a statement further expressing my thoughts later today. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'd like to invite Commissioner Mapps to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm here today because Portland is hurting. Too many of our neighbors struggle to find housing, jobs, mental health care, drug treatment, or even just a second chance. I'm also here today because every day I hear from Portlanders who tell me this city needs to change. And I'm here today because the mayor's plan is the change Portland needs. I expect to vote yes on all 5 of the mayor's proposals when they come before council next week. These plans represent a thoughtful, humane, and comprehensive response to some of the most important challenges facing our city. And I'm convinced that this plan will help Portland heal and thrive. I also know this: if the city of Portland is going to house the homeless, the city must work closely with the state of Oregon, Multnomah County, and Metro. And that's why I feel compelled to take this moment to make this plea to our partners at the state, county, and Metro. Please work with the city of Portland to help us implement the plans the mayor has unveiled today. I'll conclude by saying this: I'd like to thank the mayor for his plans, and I want to thank the mayor for his leadership. And now I will pass the mic to Mayor Ted Wheeler.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps, and thank you to all of my colleagues. We know there's no issue more critical to Portlanders right now than addressing homelessness. And we're here today to talk about a plan that I am confident that will save lives and livelihoods for all Portlanders, housed as well as unhoused. Those Portlanders who are unhoused and on the streets deserve our understanding, our compassion, and our help. The goal should be to connect people with whatever services people need to be able to get off the streets and stay off the streets. Recent polling by the Oregonian found that 94% of Portland area voters identify homelessness as their greatest area of concern. The magnitude and the depth of the homeless crisis in our city is nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe. Not everyone who is experiencing homelessness has a debilitating substance abuse or physical health or mental health problem, but indications are that a rapidly growing percentage do. Rising cases of untreated mental illness and the flood of cheap and potent drugs is increasing injuries and deaths amongst Portlanders and Oregonians who are experiencing outdoor homelessness. For example, the overdose rates for people experiencing homelessness can be 30 times greater than the general population, 30 times. Moreover, according to a recent Oregonian study, 63% of homeless Portlanders suffer from mental health issues, 63%. Total drug overdoses increased 94% between 2019 and 21. And fentanyl overdoses increased over 600% during that same time period. 600%. Homeless people living with mental illness are also highly vulnerable to violence. A recent report indicated that up to 87% of them will have violence perpetrated against them. Collectively, this is a vortex of misery for all involved. Building more affordable housing units to close our housing production gap is the fundamental solution to all of these problems. But according to a recent housing study, the city of Portland has an affordable housing gap that exceeds 20,000 units. We must be bold in our efforts to close this housing affordability gap, and we have to do it as soon as possible. In Portland, we're doing our part by reforming our permitting and approval process, but we also need changes to state law to increase affordable housing funding in Portland and indeed all across the state of Oregon. With these changes, our goal is to catalyze an additional 20,000 units of affordable housing by 2033. This is a moonshot for sure, but I believe it's entirely doable if we commit to working together. Until then, we know that the waiting lists to get into subsidized affordable housing can span between 5 and 10 years, according to a recent study that I commissioned. With long affordable housing waiting lists, untreated physical and mental illness, and large increases in substance abuse issues, more and more unhoused Portlanders and Oregonians are waiting far too long to get into affordable housing. We know that the consequences are harmful and in fact can be deadly. People experiencing homelessness tell us that what they need is understanding, compassion, and help to get off the streets. They also tell us in overwhelming numbers, 95% according to a recent Oregonian report, that they have never been offered services of any kind, 95%. There's no wonder, given that a recent assessment showed that there's over 700 self-directed campsites across 146 square miles in the city of Portland. And these sites aren't fixed, they move. Even with an increased number of outreach workers deployed to the field, there's no way we can possibly reach more than just a small fraction of the people who need help in these constantly shifting encampments. Compared to all other states, Oregon bounces at the bottom of the rankings, offering no and low income access to mental health and substance abuse treatment services. It will take time for state leaders to fix this. We know this, but the next Oregon governor needs to lead the charge with an aggressive strategy to fix this problem once and for all. Only last week, the Mental Health America ranked Oregon second to last with some incredibly somber statistics. Not only did 27% of adults in Oregon report suffering from mental illness, but 1 in 5 youth experienced a significant mental health episode during the last year. 20% of our youth. At least half the people who need drug treatment services aren't able to access them due to a lack of treatment resources. The good news is that the years-long, deadly waiting lists to get into affordable housing and treatment programs don't have to be so harmful. We can do better, and we absolutely must do better. We can better connect homeless Portlanders to state and county services by consolidating those critical services in a number of large-scale sanctioned sites. This will be paired with a phasing in of a citywide ban on self-sited, unsanctioned encampments. Why are we taking the unprecedented step of banning self-sited encampments? We need to move our scattered, vulnerable homeless population closer to the services that they need. Too often, squalid, impacted by crime, and located in dangerous locations, most camps lack even the most basic safety and sanitation. These designated campsites will include access to hygiene, litter collection, meals, and with the county, metro, and state's partnership, will also include navigation to housing, along with critical service like mental health and substance abuse treatment services. Now, I know that some will argue that we should establish these larger camps with access to service, but not ban self-sited camping citywide. I believe this thinking is well-intentioned, but I also believe it's deeply misguided. The fact is, for the past 8 months, we've increased alternative camping options without the ban, and to be completely transparent, it has not worked. While some people have gained access to services on a limited basis, writ large, it's not the strategy that's going to work for us here in the city of Portland. While limited areas of the city have most certainly experienced improved conditions, most of the individuals who have left those camps simply relocate elsewhere in the city, and the entire process starts all over again. Nobody really gets any additional help, and it costs a lot of money. So we have to do something bold, and we need to do something different, and we need to do it at a scale that will make a difference. You might remember that with the lifting of the pandemic restrictions, I declared an emergency that stepped up homeless camp removals in the most dangerous and squalid conditions, and we improved our offers of shelter space by introducing real-time reservations, rights to a shelter of choice with personal belongings and 3 30-day storage of those personal belongings. Self-sited unsanctioned encampment removals increased by 2,844%, nearly 3,000% just since we enacted those emergency orders. That was between September 20th and September 2022. But only about 20% of the individuals in those camps accepted this new and improved offer of a bed in the local indoor shelter system. In fact, on most nights, there is still excess capacity in our indoor shelter system. According to our hardworking city outreach workers, and I do want to thank them for their incredible efforts, the majority of homeless individuals in our city said that they would not go to an indoor shelter for a variety of reasons, but they would go to an alternative location to pitch their tent where they wouldn't be asked to move all the time. And many mentioned it would be nice to have access to a toilet. For many, designated outdoor camping with services would be a much better alternative than the status quo. While Commissioner Ryan and I are co-sponsoring the 5 resolutions that focus on a series of projects and plans to address homelessness. I want to thank each of my city council colleagues and their hardworking staffs for providing input and ideas. I want to acknowledge their civic courage. Now, I want to just very briefly outline the 5 resolutions that will be before the City Council for a first reading next week. The first resolution is focused on the affordable housing moonshot. As you heard from Commissioner Ryan, this resolution envisions a partnership between the city and the state to catalyze 20,000 units of affordable housing by 2033. The second resolution seeks to offer more work opportunities for those who are experiencing homelessness. The third resolution will establish the larger scale designated sites where individuals will be able to camp and receive services. It will also begin the process of prohibiting self-sited camping in the city of Portland. The fourth resolution envisions the creation of a program whereby homeless Portlanders can eliminate citations and other low-level offenses from their records in exchange for agreeing to divert into needed treatment services. And finally, the fifth resolution will formalize the city's requests to government partners that can make this all work. The city of Portland is willing to lead, but we can't do this alone. We don't have the expertise, we don't have the resources to go it alone. We have to work in partnership with other levels of government. So specifically, how can our government partners help? Let's start with the state. This is what we need from our next governor, an immediate enactment of a statewide emergency order on homelessness. I need the governor-elect to ask the outgoing governor to immediately declare an emergency to start helping cities and rural areas all around the state, including Portland. 2 days after the election, because I believe whoever wins deserves 1 day off, I invite the outgoing governor and the governor-elect to meet with me and leaders of the Oregon Mayors Association to agree on what we need from that statewide emergency declaration. Because they so often help people who are homeless from being burned out of their homes or through other natural disasters. No government agency has more experience in putting together outdoor emergency shelter camps than the state of Oregon. Let's get some camps up before winter sets in. To the leaders of our metro regional government, Portlanders are not asking for special treatment. We're asking for fair treatment. Portland cares for 80% of the region's homeless population, but we're currently allocated a much smaller percentage of the available regional funds. We're asking for a commitment to revisit the allocation formula in 2023 and to use any unanticipated revenues above this year's original projections to be used for one-time only purposes so that ongoing resources could be used to help support the programs we're proposing today. The Multnomah County Chair and I agree that both the city and the county need to work as a team to address homelessness and to address the scale of the crisis before us. Together, we're currently evaluating all the funding and programmatic tools that can be leveraged to meaningfully address at scale our humanitarian challenges. In the meantime, it's election season. Like my requests to the gubernatorial candidates, I would not be doing my job as mayor if I didn't make a similar ask of the candidates running for Multnomah County Chair. To move vulnerable people closer to services, will you work with us on a phased-in ban on self-directed, unsanctioned homeless camps? And will you work with us to immediately open currently funded but apparently closed shelter beds? And will you commit to working with us to provide services to the proposed designated camping sites? I've started out by making these requests one-on-one in phone calls and meetings, And I acknowledge it's ruffled a few feathers. I know that perhaps these requests weren't necessarily what other leaders had in mind for the use of those precious resources. But Portlanders and Oregonians have never been more clear about what their number one priority is. And I wouldn't be doing my job for the people of Portland if I wasn't willing to make a few waves on their behalf. I'm not here to make friends, nor am I here to make enemies. I'm here to face our challenges head on, and I hope you are too. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Cody for Q&A.
We're gonna start with Lisa Bailick. So I'm gonna unmute you now.
Question for the mayor. Do you have locations of the mass camps or campuses in mind? And when will you announce that?
So we do have locations in mind. We're currently in discussions with those who control those sites, and we'll be ready to discuss them as soon as we have agreements in place. And I hope the first one will come fairly quickly.
Follow up, you're requesting state and county money to make the campuses happen. You've reached out. Do you have any assurances you will get that money?
We're continuing conversations. We're expressing the need. We're reminding all of our colleagues throughout different levels of government about the insistence on the part of our residents and our taxpayers, and indeed the people who are struggling with homelessness on our streets, to address this at the scale necessary. So far, I would say those conversations are going very well. But again, this is all dependent upon them agreeing to support these proposals at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll go to Rebecca Ellis.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. I mean, this is a little similar to Lisa's, but this plan requires so much support and funding from other agencies, state, metro, county, VA's office. It almost seems like a bucket list of things that the city hopes to make happen. I'm curious if there's any part of this plan that the city can actually do without these other agencies. And I'm also curious if any of these partners have actually committed to give the city the funding to make any of these resolutions a reality.
Well, first of all, thank you. Resolutions are always aspirational. We are in detailed conversations. I think the conversations on the whole have been very productive. And in terms of your question about whether or not the city of Portland can do some of these things on our own, the answer is yes, absolutely, we can. And that's why we've already begun the discussions around siting, around infrastructure, looking at our own budgets in terms of where we can help leverage resources that are available. But again, the city of Portland doesn't have expertise in every area. We don't control the funds that come in through the regional homeless services measure. We don't provide mental health or substance abuse treatment. We really need to collaborate. And the important thing that I want to stress here is that I am hearing loudly and clearly from our mutual constituents that they don't care which government is responsible for what. They just want us to get the job done. They want compassionate responses to homelessness, and they want to see an end to unsanctioned camping across the city of Portland.
Thank you, Rebecca. Let's move on to Alex Linsky.
Hey, Alex.
Hey, good morning. I'm curious, this question, I guess, is for you and Commissioner Ryan. I know that the Safe Rest Village program has been slowed a bit due to kind of neighborhood pushback and some permitting issues. You know, I know there was an initial call to open them up a lot earlier than they have been. I'm curious how you see these sanctioned, these much larger camps, avoiding those roadblocks, and if you have any plans to expedite some of those hurdles that the SRVs have faced.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we've learned a lot, and we have found that our community partners come together with us, and their support definitely transitions once they open and they notice their neighborhood looks a lot better than it did before. And we're really excited about all of the partnerships that are evolving. And again, government can't do this alone, so it's going to be an all-in effort. So I think we've learned with Safe Rest Villages how important that is. And I have to say, since the resolutions were passed, we did start moving much faster. And so I'm delighted that we have a lot that we can reveal to the larger camps that we're talking about and what we've learned from the siting and the opening of the Safe Rest Villages. I'll turn over to the mayor if there's anything else you'd like to add.
This gets a little geeky in the weeds, but one of the original emergency declarations that I issued actually was designed to help speed up the process of locating the safe rest villages. It reduced bureaucratic impediments around permitting and some other restrictions in the way that we ordinarily do business here. And we've learned a thing or two from those initial forays into the safe rest villages that we think will help speed up this process significantly.
Great. Let's go to Megan Allison from K2.
Hi, Megan.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. Thanks for making the time. So as far as banning self-sited encampments, what is the plan if people don't want to leave their campsites? Is there the potential for them to be arrested or fined?
Yeah, ultimately, the answer to that question is yes, but that's not the intention. The intention here is to get people closer to treatment. And the way it's worked up to this point is we will notice a camp, we'll give adequate notice. We will send in impact reduction team workers and other social service workers. They will make an offer of alternative locations, including shelter and, for a lucky few, navigation to what available affordable housing there is. And then they come in on a date after the notification period and remediate the camp. And by and large, up to this point, while we've had police officers on standby, most people have listened to the IRP folks and they have either taken them up on an offer of shelter. But as I said earlier, the vast majority simply move on to the next neighborhood. And that's not an acceptable solution. It's not connecting people with services, and it certainly isn't reducing the impact of unsanctioned camps. So we believe this step is necessary, linking the expansion of these sites with all of these additional navigation services with a proposed expansion of the ban on unsanctioned self-directed sites throughout the city of Portland.
Thank you, Megan. Let's go to Nicole Hayden from Oregonian.
Hi, Nicole.
Hi, Mayor Wheeler. I was wondering what the cost for each of the sanctioned sites would be annually, and also when do you plan to start the camping ban?
So the camping ban will be, well, to answer this in maybe a backwards way, we've already started it. We've already done it in our safe routes to schools through executive directive. We've already done it in high crash corridors through executive directive. We have done specific neighborhood interventions like Old Town. We've also intervened in high traffic pedestrian corridors, but we haven't been able to do it large scale because we haven't been able to answer the question, if not here, then where? And what we want, rather than being an enforcement-based model, which we're prepared to use, but what we'd really like to see happen is create the kind of location that people would be incentivized to use. And we've heard from homeless campers what they want in overwhelming percentages is an outdoor site, a place they can pitch their tent with access to basic hygiene, litter collection, and potentially navigation to services. And we have to do it at scale. And so that's what's leading us to this necessary set of proposals that we'll be bringing to the City Council next week.
Okay, so
oh, and you asked Nicole about the cost. That is still being worked out. And in terms of the time frame, you didn't ask this question, but I'm just going to credit you with it anyway. When will we establish the first camps? And that depends on the partnerships that we're trying to develop. And as the fundraiser in chief for this effort, I'm talking to people from our United States senators, to our congressional delegation, to all three candidates for governor, to our metro regional government officials, to our county officials, and others who I believe can take up the call to provide this comprehensive and I believe humanitarian approach to the crisis on our streets.
But the larger ban citywide wouldn't start until the sites have launched. Is that
it won't be in one fell swoop. The way we'll do this is we will sequentially do this as we provide alternative locations. So it will be staged.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nicole. Let's go to Brandon Thompson from Coin.
Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Mayor, thank you for making the time. On a similar kind of note, what input or notification will neighborhoods around these sanctions camps be given? And also part of that, are there rules or that kind of thing or standards that these camps will be under as far as policies?
These are intended to be low barrier camps. That said, part of the work we're doing with potential service providers is talking about security, not only within the camp for the safety of those who are in our sanctioned camps, but also for the surrounding areas near those camps. And so this will very much be part of the process, is making sure that we keep areas around the camps safe and clean and clear.
Thank you, Brandon. Let's go to Claire Rush from the Associated Press.
Welcome, Claire.
Hello. This question is for Mayor Wheeler. How many of these larger sites are you planning on having? How many people will be able to be located on each site? And I have a follow-up question as well. You said that a lot of times currently when people are removed from camps that they just, relocate and go somewhere else. How are you going to enforce that the people you remove from a camp actually do go to these designated sites and don't just go somewhere else?
Yeah, initially we're planning on 3 sites. We're going to scale them. We want to make sure we work out the bugs, and we know that there will be bugs as we start this program. This is somewhat unique at this scale to be a city voluntarily establishing these sites. But our initial goal is 3 camps with 100 to 125-ish people. But ultimately, if that works as effectively as we expect it to, and if we have the funding from our partners that we need, and if our service providers demonstrate that they can do this effectively, then we will scale up. And it could potentially be as many as 3 sites in one general location, managed as independent sites. But there's no reason why we couldn't add several hundred to each of these sites if we're able to scale up successfully, if we get the resources, if our service providers demonstrate they have the capacity to handle it. But we want to do this in a smart way. I know people, urgency is incredibly important, but we want to get it right. So we're going to start with 100 to 125, which for the city of Portland is more significant than what we've been doing in 3 separate locations. And I forgot what you had a second question, and I'm sorry, I forgot what it was. Was it enforcement? I think it was. Ultimately, as I said earlier, we're hoping that it's a soft touch and outreach workers that are able to make that connection to homeless Portlanders. But if somebody just absolutely digs in and says, I won't go, then we'll have to talk about criminal sanctions. But I also want to stress the 4th resolution that we put into place. Our goal here isn't to write a bunch of citations and to criminalize people who are already living on our streets. Ideally, what would happen is they would take up the offer through a program we hope to develop in the not too distant future to actually waive those citations in exchange for services such as mental health or substance abuse treatment services. That's the ultimate goal here. It's not to penalize people. It's not to criminalize people. We want to steer people towards the help they need to get off and stay off the streets. That's the goal.
Let's go to Drew from Fox 12.
Welcome, Drew.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, very, very well. Thank you, Drew, for being here.
Thank you. I have a 2-part question. Are there any sites you guys are already looking at for initial sanctioned camping sites? And if and when plans go through, when is a realistic timeline for Portlanders to see action from your office about this?
The first answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We are already in discussions with individuals and organizations that control sites that we believe would be appropriate for this kind of a program. And in terms of timing, again, it depends not only on our will and our commitment here at the City of Portland, but also the strength and the urgency of the partnerships we develop, as well as the resources we're able to collectively bring together to get this program going. From my perspective, tomorrow is not too soon. This is an urgent need for the city of Portland. And in speaking with mayors all around the state through the Oregon Mayors Association, by the way, there's a bipartisan group of mayors from the east side of the state, the west side of the state, big city mayors, small city mayors. We're all in agreement that this is our number one issue. And here in the state of Oregon, and I'll speak for Portland, here in Portland, we need to be much more bold. We need to take greater risks, and we need to provide programs at a scale that can address the magnitude and the depth of the problem we're currently seeing on our streets.
Let's go to Sophie Peel from Willamette Week.
Hi, Sophie.
Hi, thanks for having us this morning. Two quick questions. So last week, Deborah Kafuri, offered a pretty biting response to your guys' letter asking for assistance, and you alluded this morning to a bit of an olive branch. Can you say whether Kafuri is now on board with parts of this plan, and if so, which ones?
So we're in discussions, and I know the chair is deeply committed to making sure that we have access to affordable housing. I know the chair is deeply committed to working with her partners at the state level to ensure that we restore a mental health and substance abuse infrastructure. All of that is critical to the development of these sites and the success of these sites. And we've had several conversations, both personally as well as staff to staff. And I'm confident that we will be able to hammer out a partnership that meets the needs of both the city and the county. After all, the people we serve are exactly the same people. And the people we serve are unequivocal in their demand that we address this humanitarian crisis on our streets.
Great. We are running a little low on time, but we'll go back down the list. I'll go back to Alex Alexi.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I am curious if you've confirmed with any operators who will be who's interested in operating any of these sites, these sanctioned campsites, if there are any local service providers who are interested. On top of that, could you speak a little bit about the upcoming trip that your staff is taking to Los Angeles to meet with service providers and how that might influence how things are run under this proposal?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we are in communication with service providers nationally who are used to operating at this scale. Our local service providers are outstanding, but they haven't done programs like this at scale. I would welcome their commitment and their partnership. And I hope as the city council takes up these resolutions next week and they have an opportunity to dive into the proposals in more detail, I hope it will generate not only ideas and improvements, but potentially partnerships with our local service providers. But we've also reached out to national service providers. I'm leading a delegation of city folks and county folks to Los Angeles next week for the purpose of meeting with an organization called Urban Alchemy, which has done programs similar to this in other states. And they're very interested in having the conversation with where our interests might align.
Great, let's go back to Megan Allison.
And by the way, Cody, I'm sorry to interrupt. I should also point out that as word has gotten out that I'm leading this delegation, we've had interest from other elected officials and service providers to also attend. And we can't take everybody who wants to go on this first trip on Monday, but I've committed to leading other delegations down to have a look at what they're doing and evaluate their programming.
Great. Megan, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you for letting me get another question in here. I was just curious for the mayor if the recent ADA lawsuit influenced this decision regarding the ban on self-designated campsites.
The ADA lawsuit did not actually catalyze this conversation. We've been in this discussion for some time and looking at this. We couldn't do anything like this during COVID. Of course, there were substantial restrictions, but as we began to lift the COVID restrictions, as I issued the executive directives, as we started to see what worked and what didn't work, we realized that this is the next logical step. And I want to be clear, this is not instead of alternative campsites like the ones we've created. It's not instead of the safe rest villages. This is not instead of the indoor shelter system. This is not instead of navigation outreach teams. This is not instead of transitional housing or navigation to permanent affordable housing. This is filling an obvious gap in our service delivery infrastructure that must be filled. Because from my perspective, the gap is what is leading to so many of the humanitarian problems and the social crises we're seeing on our streets.
Thank you. Let's go back to Rebecca Ellis from OPB.
Hey, yeah, I wanted to ask, the city's track record on building these sites, I think in the eyes of a lot of Portlanders, doesn't really inspire a ton of confidence. It took the city a really long time to site the safe rest villages, which feel like the most similar comparison. That obviously hasn't been an easy process, and those were about 60 people. You're talking anywhere between 150 to 500. Why should people believe it would be a smoother process?
Yeah, well, first of all, if it were as easy, it would have already been done by now. And those of us who are in positions of public leadership today realize that this is a daunting challenge. But we know the pieces that need to come together to make this work. And the key to all of this, it's sort of like a giant escape room, if you think about it. If one person walks into an escape room, they'll have one perspective and they probably won't be able to solve the puzzle. If you walk into an escape room with a bunch of different people with different areas of expertise and different skill sets, then you can solve the puzzle. That's what we're doing here writ large. To be serious, the city of Portland controls infrastructure. We control our limited budget. We control the opportunities around siting specific locations. But the meat and the bones of this isn't just dollars and cents. It's also expertise we don't have at the city of Portland around mental health and substance abuse, navigation to affordable housing. And when I met with our local legislative delegation, I reminded them that there's some tools we need from them too, in terms of changes to state law around caps on affordable housing in URAs, around tax credits and other tools that wouldn't cost the state of Oregon much of anything, but would really be catalytic in terms of helping us be able to establish these programs.
Thank you. Let's go back to Sophie Peel.
Hey there, just to follow up on my prior question about PFORI in the county's commitment. So you mentioned that you've been speaking with her and hoping for a partnership. I mean, has she in any way signaled or agreed to put up money for any part of this plan, or is it at this point? I think my question, to be a little bit blunt about it, is that the city has asked the county for money before for help with similar things. They've asked the state for help with similar things, and neither of those things have happened. So why do we think this time is going to be any different?
There's a couple of dynamics. First of all, the chair and I have known each other for a long time, and we are very direct with each other. And she's always clear with me about her likes and her dislikes. And I hope I'm equally transparent with her about my likes and dislikes. But we agree on much more than we disagree on. And we all agree that the basis of this proposal is connecting people with services. And we will be asking the county for their expertise, and not just the chair. She's served with distinction, but her term is nearly up. We're also talking to the candidates who seek to replace her. And we are expecting full-throated commitments to work with us prior to the ballots going out. We need to know who's with us to help us with this programming, because we can't do it alone. We need access to the expertise of the county. And as a former Multnomah County chair, I know that. I know what tools they bring to the table. They are amazing people when it comes to public health, when it comes to medical interventions in the field, when it comes to substance abuse treatment and advocacy, when it comes to mental health delivery. Those are areas where the county, and the county alone in this community, reigns supreme. We're asking for their help. We need their help.
All right, we'll have time to get to two more questions. Let's go to Drew from Fox, and then we'll go to Claire from the Associated Press.
And Cody, I should have added one more thing, and I'm sorry, my memory was a little lapsing there. We're working with the county right now on the finance piece, particularly related to what we call our fall bump. For those who aren't familiar with that, that's our fall budget adjustment process. We budget based on our financial projections in the spring, but those financial projections often change. Of late, we've been surprised in a good way by revenues exceeding original forecasts. And those are therefore unallocated dollars that can be used for this purpose without impacting any existing programs. And so that's part of the work we're doing staff to staff, is really going through our budgets and seeing where there might be some flexibility to help support this program.
We did it last year.
And I will also remind you, because Bobby's reminding me, we actually did this last year. We worked in partnership. We certainly had our differences of opinion, but we worked together very, very closely on a fall bump proposal last year. Was it the spring?
30 million.
Was it the fall or this
last fall?
It was the fall. So yeah, we collectively, we put in 30 million, the county put in 30 million, and we made things happen. And I hope that kind of partnership prevails.
Thank you.
Hi.
Mayor. Yep, let's go to Drew. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking another question. So obviously one of the resolutions is to reduce the 5-year average waiting list to get into affordable housing with the hope to build 20,000 units by 2033. That's still more than 10 years away. Why is this a good solution, and what are people supposed to do until then?
So this is a strategy that we should have done 20 years ago. Obviously, when it comes to the affordable housing moonshot, as we're describing it, it has been long known that we had an affordable housing shortfall in the city of Portland. I'm not being Pollyannish about this and saying we can solve this next year or the year after that or the year after that. We could, with dedication and with changes in state law and a commitment on the part of all levels of government, we could close that gap. We could stand here in a decade with that gap either completely closed or substantially closed. And we really have no choice but to pursue this. And while we're talking about it today in the context of helping people get off the street and get into to housing and services that they need to be successful in that housing, we also need to be economically viable. And what we're seeing is the cost of living in the city of Portland continues to escalate. The cost of housing continues to become less and less affordable to working families. So this is a good strategy, not only for humanitarian reasons, it's a good strategy for economic and ongoing viability reasons as well. We should absolutely make this a priority.
All right, let's move on to our final question. It'll be from Claire Rush from the AP.
Hi, Claire.
Hi, thanks for taking an additional question. Voters have passed hundreds of millions of dollars in affordable housing bonds in recent years. Portland voters passed a city bond in 2016, 258 million. In 2018, voters approved more than 650 million for Metro regional housing bond. I'm wondering, will those funds go towards this at all? How are you planning? There's already been all of this money approved for affordable housing. Why hasn't that been?
Yeah, Claire. Yeah, thank you for the question. The answer is absolutely. They're already going towards that based on what the voters voted on. The language of those ballot measures absolutely reserves significant resources for affordable housing. So the answer is yes. There's nothing special we need to do with those particular measures, but they're already doing the job in the community.
It's nowhere near 20.
Yeah, to be clear though, again, just in the interest of full transparency, while those resources are desperately needed, they're not sufficient. That we cannot close a 20,000 unit gap without the private sector being the primary impetus for the development of that housing. And what the private sector developers are telling us, the affordable housing developers, is we need to take a hard look at urban renewal areas and the cap on affordable housing in those URAs, as well as tax credits that could be available to help catalyze significantly more affordable housing. And that's on top of the work that Dan and Mingus are doing to try to rationalize our permitting process, which is harder than it sounds or looks. I've been there and I can tell you it's years and years of entrenched layers. And my two colleagues are doing a great job of working through that to improve that process as well at the city level.